What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another video here on the channel. My name is Tommy Clark. I'm a certified nutrition coach, and today we're going to be answering the question, should basketball players take creatine? I really wanted to make this video because there's a lot of misconceptions and confusion and questions when it comes to creatine in general, just as a general supplement, and for athletes in terms of improving athletic performance. And should athletes take it? Is it safe? What are the risks? What are the benefits? How should you dose it? What type of creatine should you take? So we'll clear up all those questions in today's video. And of course, drop a like and subscribe down below if you haven't already. If you're new around here, there's new videos coming out every single Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday with nutrition tips just like this. Again, the first question we gotta ask is, what is creatine? Because that's where the misconceptions start. A lot of people are still under this misguided assumption that creatine is a steroid and steroids are bad for you. But if you look at it objectively, just purely scientifically, creatine is not a steroid. It is in fact an amino acid. And I'm gonna toss the images up on the screen right now. An amino acid and a steroid, which is derived from cholesterol, which is a type of fat, are not biochemically the same thing. So we can clear up that misconception that creatine is a steroid, because it is not. It is actually an amino acid, and its role in your body is to support energy production in those first 5 to 10 seconds of explosive activity. So you could think of this like being in the weight room doing a heavy set, or as a basketball player specifically, doing explosive things like jumping up for a rebound, chasing down an offensive player on a fast break. You're exploding, you're not sustaining that intensity for long periods of time, but you're exploding real quick. You got to chase that guy down, jump up for the rebound, jump up for the block, cut to the basket, those sorts of things. That's where creatine supports energy production. And like I said, it's an amino acid, and you get some of it from your diet. So you typically find it in things like red meat and just meat in general. 1 pound of red meat has roughly 1 gram of creatine in it. So you don't get a ton from your diet. The rest is produced inside of your body. And even then, the combined total of the amount that you get dietarily just from food and that you produce endogenously in your body isn't enough to actually fully saturate your muscle creatine stores. So that's where the thought process of potentially supplementing with creatine as beneficial comes in, because even if you eat red meat and meat in general and you're producing creatine in your own body, you're probably not saturating your muscle creatine stores, because like I said, you're only getting about 1 gram for every pound of red meat, and your body only produces about 1 gram or 2 per day. So even then, you're not saturating your muscle creatine stores. So that's where the line of thought of supplementing with creatine comes in, to fully saturate your muscle creatine stores and provide more of those benefits that we just talked about. So in terms of the specific benefits that you're gonna look at when it comes to creatine, improved strength and power, an increase in lean body mass. That's one of the, really the only quote unquote side effect of taking creatine is weight gain. And that typically comes from an increase in intramuscular water stores. So you retain water weight, but it's in your muscle. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. You really don't feel bloated. Again, more common myths that you often hear when it comes to creatine. There's also research to suggest that it could potentially improve muscle recovery and recovery from your training as an athlete. So that's where, especially as a team sport athlete, that's a very promising aspect of creatine supplementation. And then some more research looked at the combination of taking in large amounts of carbohydrates in conjunction with creatine, and they found that when you took about 95 grams of glucose along with creatine, both the absorption of the glucose and of the creatine were improved. So when it comes to improving athletic performance and also refueling after your training session, potentially combining carbohydrates with creatine, for example, tossing creatine into your protein shake post-workout, could be a good way to enhance glycogen replenishment and also enhance the replenishment of your muscle creatine stores. So we'll talk about that more when we get to how to take it, but just wanted to bring that up. And then some other really cool research has been done looking into creatine and neuroprotective benefits in terms of looking at things like Alzheimer's disease and cognitive decline and other neurodegenerative diseases. And it's really interesting, honestly, beyond the scope of this particular video. I just wanted to bring that up because that's a really interesting new line of research. And I'll link some more stuff in the description below as far as papers and research that you can dive into on your own time if you want to, if that interests you. And lastly, before we move on to the next section of the video talking about risks and how to take it and all that other stuff, another interesting benefit potentially that you can get from taking creatine is better heat tolerance or better training performance in hotter environments. Because like I said earlier, one of the quote unquote side effects of taking creatine is holding onto excess water, not really excess water, but holding onto more water in your muscles. So the thought process behind that is by holding onto more water, you could potentially improve your hydration. So another interesting potential benefit, but really the main benefits that you're gonna get from creatine as an athlete and as a basketball player is gonna come from increased strength and power and a potential increase in lean mass. All right, so now that we've got the benefits out of the way, we gotta look at the question that always comes up. What are the side effects? Are there any negative effects to taking creatine? Is there any negative effect taking it for too long or too high of a dose? And if you look at the research, and just to put this into perspective, creatine has been researched over 1,000 times. There really is no negative effect when it comes to taking creatine. Again, assuming that you're taking it from a reputable brand, a reputable company that's NSF certified for sport. I mentioned this in the protein powder video that I did. Assuming that you're taking it from a reputable source, there really are no health downfalls when it comes to taking creatine. The only real side effect that's been shown is the weight gain, and that's not even really a side effect. And oftentimes people who are taking creatine aren't really complaining that they gain a couple pounds, and oftentimes that weight gain comes from just intramuscular water weight, like I mentioned before, so not really even a bad thing. And just to highlight the safety, I looked up a couple studies and was reading the International Society of Sports Nutrition position stand on creatine, which I linked down below if you want to dig into that yourself. And there's a quote from it saying, additionally, in a study specifically designed to assess the safety of creatine supplementation, American collegiate football players ingesting about 16 grams per day, which by the way is well above the dose that you would be taking anyway, and we'll get to that in a second, of creatine for 5 days and 5 to 10 grams per day for 21 months, so that's the actual maintenance dose, had no clinically significant differences among creatine users and controls in markers of renal function, so that's kidney function, muscle and liver enzymes, markers of catabolism, electrolytes, blood lipids, red cell status, lymphocytes, urine volume, clinical urinalysis, or urine specific gravity. So long story short, when we looked at biomarkers and health markers that are of concern when it comes to creatine supplementation, there was no difference between these football players who were taking creatine and those who were not. And then another study that was looking at American collegiate football players as well. And obviously football and basketball are not the exact same sport, but both team sports, and it's very comparable when it comes to looking at it for this purpose. Another study in collegiate football players found that athletes who use creatine experienced less incidence of muscle cramping, heat illness/dehydration, muscle tightness, muscle strains, and total injuries compared to athletes who did not supplement their diet with creatine. So not only no risks, but like we talked about, a lot of potential benefits when it comes to creatine supplementation. And last but not least, another study looking at actually professional basketball players playing overseas in Spain ingesting creatine over the course of 3 seasons. So pretty long relative to most studies. 3 years is a long time to be looking at a certain population. And there were no abnormalities in their blood markers. So again, hopefully this helps convince you there really are no negative health effects, especially the main concern is with your kidneys. And assuming you have no underlying health conditions, creatine is totally fine. And again, if you have any concerns, definitely consult with a physician, a doctor. I don't want to take this as medical advice by any means, but hopefully this research helps kind of put your mind at ease when it comes to all the myths and sensationalized news that you'll see in like these magazines or on social media trying to convince you that creatine is bad for you. But again, consult with your physician if you have any concerns about that, and don't take this as medical advice. And the last note on safety, there have been studies looking at creatine consumption of doses of about 30 grams, which again is well above the maintenance dose and well above what you would even be taking for up to 5 years. So 30 grams per day for 5 years. And again, no abnormal health outcomes or negative effects when it came to creatine supplementation. One thing to note is that there are creatine non-responders. So that doesn't necessarily mean creatine is going to negatively affect you, which it's not, but there is the potential that you won't respond to it and see those same benefits, and it might just not do anything for you. And typically you'll see this if you consume a lot of meat in your diet and you're already getting a lot of dietary creatine in your diet. Like I know a guy who's a power lifter and eats a ton of food on a daily basis and eating a pretty crazy amount of protein. I mean, relative to his body weight, it's not that crazy, but he eats a lot of protein, a lot of which comes from animal sources, which contain creatine, and he's telling me he's a creatine non-responder. So if you're eating a lot of animal protein, that might happen. Typically, people who see the most benefits from creatine tend to be those that don't eat a lot of animal protein. So especially if you're a vegetarian or a vegan basketball player, you're gonna really benefit from supplementing with creatine. And again, just want to emphasize the fact that being a non-responder doesn't mean that creatine negatively affected you. It just means that it didn't do anything positive. So there's really no harm in trying, and that's really the only way that you'll know that if you're a non-responder or not. So my recommendation is try it, see if it works for you. If it does, awesome. If it doesn't, no stress, there was no harm done. And then in terms of dosages, so how to take it, there's some debate whether or not to load, not to load, and to load creatine essentially means to take a higher dose for a shorter amount of time and then transition to a maintenance dose. And when you don't load, you just start off with that maintenance dose of about 5 grams and just take that consistently every day. So doing the loading phase of about 15 to 20 grams for 3 to 5 days will load your muscle creatine stores quicker, but doing that maintenance dose of about 5 grams will load it just the same. It just might take a little bit longer. So there's really no better or worse way to do it. Anecdotally, some people report feeling bloated or having some stomach upset if they do load. So if you have a sensitive stomach, I would recommend starting off with the maintenance phase and just waiting a little bit longer for those creatine stores to saturate. And you might not see those immediate performance improvements, but it will come in time. And then as far as when to take it, like I said earlier, there's some evidence to suggest that it might be better absorbed when you take it with carbohydrates or protein. So my recommendation is if you can, take it with your protein shake after you work out, or take it with a meal after you work out to just enhance the absorption. But at the same time, don't stress over that. The general recommendation is just take it when you can. Take it when you remember to take it. So if it's easier if you just get it done in the morning or in the evening, do it then. But if you want to optimize it, I'd recommend just be on the safe side, take it with a meal post-workout. And lastly, the question always comes up, what type of creatine should I take? And if you look at the over 1,000 studies that have been done, the vast majority of them that have shown the efficacy and safety of creatine have been done on creatine monohydrate. And a lot of times you'll see different forms of creatine like buffered creatine, creatine HCl, creatine ethyl ester. And just like most supplements, the supplement companies are trying to sell you something. They try to, because creatine monohydrate is very cheap. You can get it for like 10, 15 bucks. It's effective, it gets the job done. So supplement companies then think, okay, how can we make more money off this? So they come out with all these new forms, like the ones I just mentioned, and they try to sell you them for a lot higher of a price. So just be aware of that. I would recommend just going with creatine monohydrate until there's more conclusive research that demonstrates that another form of creatine is more effective. Just go with the one that's tried and tested and been studied for over a couple of decades now and been proven to be safe, proven to be effective, and it gets the job done. Not to mention it's cheap. You can get it for 10, 15 bucks. There's no reason to waste your money on something that's not gonna do any better of a job. So I would recommend going with creatine monohydrate. And I wanna remind you, make sure if you're purchasing a creatine supplement, you're gonna wanna make sure it's third-party tested, NSF certified for sport. There's also another certification called Informed Choice, I believe is the name. All those third-party certifications, you wanna make sure your supplement falls under those so you don't get popped for a banned substance that you didn't mean to take, because that's the last thing we wanna have happen. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. As always, let me know if you have any questions. I know a lot of questions always come up about creatine, so be sure if I didn't answer anything that you still have questions about, leave a comment down below, drop a like on this video, and subscribe for new videos just like this every single Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Been super consistent with them, so seriously, if you want nutrition tips that are actually gonna really help you take your athletic performance to that next level, definitely be sure to subscribe. And it'd mean a lot to me if you went ahead and shared this video with another friend of yours. And as always, there's free resources linked in the description below. Any research or studies or reviews or other videos that I talked about will be linked as well, so you can check those out, do your own research. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you in the next video.